Good evening. Welcome to the Marion Minor Cook Athenaeum. My name is Annie Bernstein. I'm a sophomore at CMC studying international relations, and tonight I have the honor of introducing Professor Amos Guiora. We are lucky to have him here tonight to discuss Israel's future in a time of great uncertainty in the region. Professor Amos Guiora has a wealth of experience in academia and is a professor of law at the University of Utah. In addition, Guiora is a distinguished fellow at the Consortium for the Research and Study of Holocaust and the Law at Chicago-Kent College of Law and works at the International Center for Conflict Resolution and the Katz School of Business at University of Pittsburgh. Guiora is also the inaugural chair of the University of Utah Independent Review Committee. Guiora has published extensively both in the US and Europe and is the author of several books and book chapters. His most recent book is Armies of Enablers: Survivor Stories of Complicity and Betrayal in Sexual Assaults. Guiora has been an expert witness in civil and criminal cases both in the US and the Netherlands. He has also been involved over a number of years in negotiation efforts regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He has testified before the US Senate Judiciary Committee, the U.S. House of Representatives Committee on Homeland Security, the Committee on Foreign Affairs in the Dutch House of Representatives, and the Judiciary Committee of the Utah House of Representatives. Before we begin, we ask that you please silence your devices and give your full attention to tonight's speaker. Now, please join me in welcoming Professor Amos Guiora to the stage. Thank you.
Good evening. So when Priya reached out to me and invited me to come speak, to share my thoughts about, if we call it Israel to where, Israel now, and Israel to where, I thought to myself, where do you begin? So the place to begin, obviously, for those who don't know, somebody asked me, how long have I known you, Hiram? And I think it's, who's counting, 35-ish? Who's counting, right? And so I'm obviously very thankful to the two of you for inviting me. Thank you. To add to the gracious introduction, I commute between Salt Lake and Jerusalem. We live outside Jerusalem. And when I think about Israel to where, for me, life begins in many ways on the morning of October the 7th. Because for me, as an Israeli, and I don't want to get into details, as I mentioned to Priya, we have a child who serves in the IDF. I don't want to get into details about that at all. But there's no doubt that that Saturday morning changed everything. And one of the questions, obviously, we as Israelis ask ourselves is, where is all this going? I know that some of you have been to Israel, some of you have Israeli families, but I now need to take you one step back. We, my wife and I, you know Hagit, right? We've been very, very active in the protest movements for the past 4 or 5 years. You know, every Saturday night, protesting against, first of all, we wanted Netanyahu for his then government to fall. We succeeded. We've been very active in the demonstrations against the judicial reform, which is nothing more than evisceration of law and rule of law. And obviously, since October 7th, we've been to all the demonstrations, and I've marched with the hostage families. What it tells me, in spite of all the criticism, and I'm well aware of the criticism of Israel, I also need to add in full disclosure, nobody here will be more critical of Netanyahu than me. But that doesn't mean that there's a separation for me distinguishing between Netanyahu, who I loathe, hate, despise every which way, wrote a book about it, and my deep love for Israel and my optimism about where we go from here. So when I tell people that I'm optimistic, they look at me and they're like, really? And the answer is absolutely, and here's why. Because when I look at the demonstrations, those Saturday nights, and by the way, I know some of you have been to Israel and you've seen the demonstrations. It's no fun to demonstrate. It's no fun to have verbal assaults from the other side. It's no fun to have physical interactions with police. I also add in parentheses, I give as good as I get, trust me. And here's what it tells me, that particularly the young people of Israel are locked in on the need to resist and the need to fight. And the moment that young people are with us, the older set, and understand that there are real dangers here, real dangers, it gives me a sense of reassurance, full stop. Along with that optimism, because I am a realist, when I look at Israeli politics in the moment, and this is the book I just finished last month. The book is called, Enablers Across the Ages, Normalizing the Unimaginable. I think as Hiram knows, my research is all about bystanders and enablers. And in this new book, I look at those who enable Netanyahu. And when I think about Israel, where do we go from here? The first thing that has to happen is we have to obviously have down the road, it'll take a tad, is a change in government, which will take time. More importantly and more pressing is we need to understand that as bad as he is, and yes, he's awful, he is, it's X number of people who surround him, the enablers, who absolutely know that there's real harm being done, and it's those people who we need to hold accountable. So when I talk about enablers, I got interviewed this morning at 6 o'clock, right? We texted at 3 this morning, yes, okay. I wrote to you at 3, right? When I got interviewed this morning by one of Israel's leading podcasters on the Walla website, conversation was all about the enablers. Because it turns out that for whatever reason, I'm one of the few, if not the only, who identifies those who protect Netanyahu. And I call them out by name because at my age, it's not about the broad themes, but it's rather about the specific individuals. And so I won't bore you with all the names, but for me, this notion of holding people accountable is essential. And not broad, but specific. And so when I undertook this project last year, I was very fortunate to have the opportunity over the course of months. I had access to the highest level of former decision makers in Israel, all anonymous for obvious reasons. And what I learned from them was the following. One, to their credit, their deep understanding that what is happening today in Israel is bad. That it's bad in the following 2 ways. Speaking now, as the Israeli who's involved in this. One, those of you who follow this know that there's this effort, what's called judicial reform. Reform in quotations because it's, air quote, which is undermining democracy. We don't have a constitution in Israel for complicated political reasons from when the state was created in 1948, but we have this Declaration of Independence which talks about democracy, a Jewish democratic state. And if you have judicial reform which seeks to undermine democracy, then you're acting against the interests of the state. And for that, you must be held accountable. And the second thing, again, as an Israeli who's been very involved in this, we need to be very honest, even if this would irritate some of you, which is okay. The government of Israel doesn't want the hostages to be returned. The government of Israel doesn't want the hostages returned because the government, meaning Netanyahu, understands that the moment there are 70, depends how you count, 75 to 79 still being held. The moment all of them are back, his government will fall because his extreme right wing will turn on him. And Netanyahu has one interest and one interest only. We talk about Israel to where one of the things we need to understand is that we have a prime minister who has only one goal in mind, and that's his own political survival. That's what interests Bibi Netanyahu. I think Hiram knows that it's a complicated story, but there's been an interaction years ago between my wife's family and Netanyahu. So I've been following Netanyahu for 40 years. And the moment you have a prime minister whose interest is one, himself, and in spite of the ongoing criminal trials, he is under trial, and the district court in Jerusalem, you want to talk about enablers, enabling, they cancel the trial, they hear his testimony, they don't hear his testimony, it's a problem. But we have a prime minister who's under not only indictment, but as we speak, bribery, corruption, violation of public trust. That's outrageous. But by law, you can be a serving prime minister in spite of the fact that you're on trial. He understands, doesn't need me to tell him this, he knows this himself, that the moment that he's no longer prime minister, the trials will pick up 3-4 days a week, he'll be convicted and he'll go to jail. And by the way, he'll look good in orange. I'm very much looking forward to seeing him in orange. But the ones who are caught in the middle, and when we talk about Israel to where we have to begin, have no choice, is the hostages. I'm well aware of the fact, trust me, that there are those who say, wait a minute, what about the Gazans? And trust me, I get that. And I also need to add to the very gracious introduction that I served for 20 years in the Israel Defense Forces and the Judge Advocate General Corps. I served for 5 years in the Gaza Strip, including 3 years as the legal advisor of the Gaza Strip. And as Hiram knows, name any counterterrorism operation in the course of those years, and I was involved from the legal perspective. So I get this stuff, right? So what's happening in Gaza, or what happened in Gaza, what is happening in Gaza, is obviously terrible. But I also need to add, because we also need to have an adult conversation about Israel, to where we haven't even begun as Israelis to fully appreciate, understand, internalize what happened on October 7th. And we cannot have this conversation without us as Israelis beginning to understand what happened on that awful Saturday. There are three ways to look at this, and I'm sure that all of you have different levels of knowledge. One, did the IDF screw up every which way and some? The Chief of Staff, Herzl Levy, is resigning next in March, April. He has a replacement who's been named, which is, bless you. So the IDF screwed up. The General Security Services, which is our FBI, did they screw up? 100%. On the other hand, what happened that morning will go down in the annals, and I know this is problematic for people, bless you again. It's the worst day in Jewish history since the Holocaust. And I speak as the only child of two Holocaust survivors, and I hate the Holocaust comparison because I get interviewed all the time, is this the new Holocaust? I don't like that. But as an Israeli, I stand before you and say, what happened on October 7th was the Holocaust. And what has happened subsequent to October 7th is also the continuation in many ways of the Holocaust, particularly with respect to the sexual violence against women. And sexual violence, because we're in polite company, that's the polite term, it is unhinged sexual violence. I'm also, thank you to the students here for being honest with me about before dinner. I'm well aware that there is, in some quarters in the United States and the world, unwillingness to acknowledge what happened to the women that day and what has continued happening to the women. And that's something we absolutely must discuss. I need to add to that, those of you who follow this carefully know that of the 75 to 79 hostages who are still being held, there are two infants. They're siblings. Their last name is Bibas. The father is the one who was released, today's Thursday, on Saturday. The wife is still held, and we do not know the fate of the two children who must be somewhere between 2 to 4 years old. As an Israeli, one of the things we're asking ourselves hourly, we're waiting for Hamas to tell us what is the fate of these two children. And it is an open guess how Israeli society will react if we are informed the worst of the worst, that they were murdered by Hamas over the course of the past 15 months. I have no idea how Israeli society will react to two children being murdered in captivity. In the context of where we go forward, we're constantly, as Israelis, one step forward, 2 steps backwards, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. Because I think we have not yet truly begun to understand the consequences of October the 7th. Full stop. So I, like you, watched the President of the United States with Netanyahu fawning next to him the other day with this, U.S. will buy Gaza, U.S. will cure Gaza, U.S. will have a hotel in Gaza, we'll have whatever the hell it is. So I just put aside the fact Trump is real estate agent in Gaza, but I ask myself a much larger question, which is where you're putting 1.7 million Gazans. And I know that Trump said yesterday, the world loves my idea, which, okay, fine. But there are 1.7 million Gazans who need to be taken care of. And so when we talked about Israel to where, trust me, I'm aware of our crazy right wing in Israel, I get it. But those of us who are, center left, well understand that in the context of Israel to where we need to address the question of what happens to Gaza and Gazans. You cannot separate this from this. It's not linear. It's not, like this, like this, like this. It's all integrated. So Trump, with Bibi standing next to him, has this idea of off they go. I don't know where they go, to Jordan, Egypt, Morocco. I don't know where the hell they go. Maybe they come to CMC. It's a real issue. It's a critical issue. Again, full stop. I remind all of you that 20 years ago, Hamas was democratically elected. Fact of life, the Gazan population voted out the Palestinian Authority and voted in Hamas. Is this what they intended? I don't know, but Hamas won democratic elections. We cannot forget that for a second. We had hoped over the course of the past year and a half that there would be, I don't know if the word is civil disobedience, there would be some kind of an uprising against Hamas, because I think we need to be very honest about this. Hamas has caused extraordinary harm, damage to Gazans. Open your TV, look at your social media. And look at what Gaza looks like at the moment. It looks awful. Some have said, is it the new Dresden? Maybe. So part of that is clearly Hamas's fault because they're holding the hostages. And we're trying to get the hostages, and we're trying to get the hostages. On the other hand, we also have to kill those who are responsible for October the 7th. We cannot begin until we resolve these. Then we have to move on to the next question. I'm asked all the time, because I'm interviewed on this all the time, who's the next leader in Israel? What's the next generation of leadership in Israel? So if I run down the list, it's the same list over and over and over and over again. People who create a party, because in this parliamentary system, you create a party, you put together a coalition, it lasts for 3.5 minutes. We tragically do not have a young, youthful, inspiring person who people like me can rally around and say, Zoe, this is the guy. We don't have that. It's a problem. And so the candidates whose names you hear over and over, there's Benny Gantz, who had been his defense minister. There's Naftali Bennett, who had been the prime minister. There's Yair Lapid, whose chances are probably chances of me having a ponytail. And so it's the same over and over and over again. And we have yet to identify those who can actually re-engage that swath in the middle. It's a problem. What complicates it are the following. One, we have this religious community, with all due respect to the rabbi. We have our Orthodox community who are absolutely locked in on anti-democratic values in quotations. And our Orthodox Jews, what it really, in terms of Israel, to where there are two critical issues that we as Israelis are going to have to address. One is, I don't know if you know, Orthodox Jews don't serve in the IDF. They don't serve in the IDF because Ben Gurion, may he rest in peace, made a deal with the Charedim, with the Orthodox in 48, that they won't serve. But when the deal was made, there were 600 who got the deferment. Today it's thousands. And if you don't know, then I will share with you now, we are suffering from a serious IDF manpower issue for the following reasons. One, we've had a lot of soldiers killed. I mean, a lot, but by our numbers. We've had a lot of soldiers wounded. We had 300,000 reservists. 300,000 reservists, if you do, I'm not good at math, right, which is, you're the economist, you can help me with the math here. We're a population of 10 million. If 300,000 are doing reserve duty, that is not sustainable economically. One of the things that has happened in the last week to 10 days is that reservists are starting to say, wait a minute, maybe I won't show up. And if the Charedim, the Orthodox, don't come to be drafted, and the reservists are hesitating, it makes this a little bit unsustainable. The other question with the Orthodox Jews, which is a huge political issue that has never been resolved, is they don't work. I don't know if you know, Orthodox men do not work. They spend their life in religious study or spend their life working on the system. Not working, but working on the system. We pay for them. So we as taxpayers, I am, on the one hand, I'm supporting people who don't serve in the IDF, and I'm supporting people who don't work. That doesn't make any sense at all. One of the critical issues, if you follow Israeli politics really carefully, if the government will fall, amen, it'll be because of this, because Netanyahu understands, because the IDF is saying to them all the time, we now have a new Minister of Defense who's as qualified as zero, but he is our Minister of Defense. We don't have soldiers. And if you don't have soldiers, I remind you, we're still at war, however you want to define it. I don't know what will happen in Gaza. I don't know what will happen in Syria. I know last night you had a speaker talking about Lebanon. I don't know what's going to happen in Lebanon. I remind all of you that the Houthis are firing missiles into Israel. We still have Iran, and we also have, if that's not enough, we have Jewish terrorism in the West Bank, and we have Palestinian terrorism in the West Bank. I'm not good at math, right? That's a 7-front war. Day in, day out. Now, you don't have to be fighting in Gaza every day to still to be a war. By the way, 2 soldiers were killed last night or this morning, right? It's daily, and it's exhausting. What's also exhausting in terms of Israel to wear is spending time in a bomb shelter. So I like, the what it was called, the Iron Dome. How's it in English? Iron Dome? Iron Dome. So when the Iron Dome goes off, you run to the shelter. Those who run to the shelter. I've been there with my granddaughters. It's also a reality. And so the question, when people keep saying, where do we go with this? We're stuck. We're stuck not only in terms of ourselves for the obvious reasons, because we're still at war. We have not yet begun addressing, October 7th. And again, if this irritates some of you, right? Priya said I can speak my truth, right? We have an American president who I don't think genuinely understands the enormous complexity of this situation. But he has this fawning prime minister. They have this beyond complicated relationship. Bibi thinks they're BFFs, but I don't think Trump is BFF with anybody other than with Trump. And that Netanyahu, thinks that he can, quote unquote, play Trump. And what I saw in this press conference is Trump did this to him. I got this. Those of you who are sports fans, basketball fans, right? There are 5 guys on the court, there are 4 other guys in the rotation, then there are the towel wavers, right? Bibi's a towel waver. That's what he's been relegated to. And he did not get the 2 things he most desperately needs in terms of his extreme right wing. He did not get Jewish resettlement in the Gaza Strip, which is what our crazy right wing wants. He did not get annexation of the West Bank, which Trump said we'll talk about it in 4 weeks. And I assume when Trump says we'll talk about it in 4 weeks, means we'll talk about it when I want to talk about it, not when you want to talk about it. Netanyahu came back to, well, he's still in Washington because he has to stay in a fancy hotel on my tax shekels with his crazy wife. In parentheses, if you're not aware of the extraordinary power of his crazy wife, you're missing a critical aspect of Israeli politics. His wife, who is now, she's going back on Sunday, she's going to be investigated by the police, I believe, on Monday for witness intimidation. She has already been indicted for other things in the past and been convicted. It sounds strange that a country like Israel has a prime minister's wife who actually runs the country. I am not exaggerating. Hang on, I'll come back to her in a second. And I'll come back to her son also, because he's problematic in the context of what we're talking about here. But if you have an American president who the Israeli prime minister thinks, we're BFFs, the American president is willing to view Gaza as a transactional, what was the expression? Mar-a-Lago, Gaza, right? Okay, give me a, how? Give me a break. Unfortunately, X percentage of the Israeli public buys into this. That's a huge problem. Full stop. We have another problem. And I know this is uncomfortable, but it is what it is. X percentage of the Arab world would like for all of us to be dead. That also needs to be said very clearly. And I'm not some right-wing guy, I'm actually out here. We're at war. It's a problem. Next problem. One of our great concerns, obviously, it's an uncomfortable topic, but the numbers are there. Skilled Israelis, educated Israelis, young people in their 30s and 40s are talking about leaving. That's a problem. Brain drain for a small country like us, there are only 10 million of us, and if you do the math, there are 10 million of us. 15% are Orthodox, 15% are Israeli Arabs, so we're now to 70%. I'm not good at it. 70% of 10 million, whatever that is, 7 million, right? Okay. By the way, of those 7 million, 300,000 did reserve duty. I mean, think about the numbers. And if indeed the numbers are correct, or the suggestion, the intimation of numbers about people in their 30s, 40s, particularly, there are 2 groups who are talking about leaving. One is physicians, because evidently it's easier to get jobs, whether in the United States, Australia, or New Zealand. And the other, for reasons I don't know whatsoever, I'm looking right at you, are math professors. There was a whole drain of math professors, I think, either from Mechon Weizmann or from Jerusalem, who left earlier this year. That's a real problem. They say the following, that as long as we don't address the critical question of the Orthodox Jews, it's expensive to have, those who are leaving are those who did reserve duty. And they're the ones also who are paying their taxes. And the Orthodox are getting the free pass. That's a problem. So if you take everything I've said to date, here's where we are. We are, to call it I don't mean this in a religious sense, but we are like at a crossroads. And it's a fight. So in all those Saturday night after Saturday night after Saturday night after Saturday night that 500,000 or 400,000 other people demonstrated against the judicial reform, it was an extraordinary moment. It began with people who were my age. I remember when my wife went to one of the first demonstrations against Bibi, she came home really depressed because she was literally the youngest person there. And the switch happened when your age came to the demonstration. And that's when we understood, that the young people understood, this is for real. And there is the opportunity for not only civic engagement. Is it fun to demonstrate? No, it actually sucks. You know, it rains, in the summer it's hot. Those who've been to Israel know that in the summer it's hot, it's hot. Is the interaction with the other side fun? No, it's not. It actually is not fun at all. But we understand that we are in a fight on two different levels. One within ourselves, and two with the broader community. But I also need to say the following. For me, the real danger is not Hamas. I never bought into Hamas is the real danger. Or Iran, never bought into that whatsoever. And the Houthis are a pain in the ass, but they're not much more than that. The real harm, the real danger is within. And the harm from within are, frankly, those who are not wedded to democracy, those who believe in minimizing the rights of minorities, and those who absolutely believe that we can, kick their ass. Oh, this just in. You can't. And so when Netanyahu talks about B'yachad Netzach, those who speak Hebrew, together we will win. Right? So no, we're not going to win. You cannot defeat Hamas. You can kill Hamas, but you can't defeat Hamas. You can't kill an idea. We've had this conversation 846 times. You can't defeat Hamas. It doesn't work like that. Sure, we can kill them. We can do this, this, and this. We're not going to kill Hamas. We're not going to defeat Hamas. In the same way that we didn't defeat the PLO, which became the PA. You can kill them here. You can do operational counterterrorism. But you can't defeat them. And at the end of the day, and this goes back to your very gracious introduction, from 1994 to 1999, Oslo, I was involved deeply in the implementation of the Oslo peace process officially, and then from 2010 to 2019-ish, what's called Track 2 negotiations, which is unofficial negotiations between us and the Palestinians, not important who, what, why, where, when. So I've spent 15 years of my life negotiating with Palestinians. The podcaster who was fabulous when she interviewed me earlier today, she asked me if there were particular moments during my career in the IDF where I said, like, whoa. And the first wow is when I was brought in to be the lead lawyer on implementation of Oslo, which obviously was a great honor. Were there bad days? Sure, there were terrible days. But there was also a sense, us and with the Palestinians, did we fight? Was there drama? Was there yelling? Was there screaming? Sure, but it's theater. There was a sense, maybe transient, that it's possible to come together. We're not friends. I don't want anybody to think they know we're friends. We're not. But with a sense of common interest that continuing this present paradigm doesn't lead to anything positive for anyone. There are always the extremists here. There are extremists here. And when you negotiate, your primary responsibility is to ignore that noise, to drown it. When I was involved for 9 years in the unofficial negotiations, which there are two, theater being theater and drama being drama and yelling being yelling, it's okay. There was a realization that if we don't move the ball together, everybody with their own interests, again, it's not BFF sitting around. It's not. People like me will tell you the following. I get asked this all the time. Two-state solution. So at the moment, the answer is no. And as former Palestinian from the PA, Palestinian Authority, told me once, he was right. Spent hours with him. Were we friends? No. But he said to me the following, which I thought was sage advice. Leave us alone until we get our own house in order. And our own house being in order, the PA here and Hamas here. And I remind you, if you don't know, when Hamas defeated the PA in the elections, before they defeated them in the elections, they killed them. So there's a real conflict between Hamas and the PA. It's a reality. It's an uncomfortable reality. I get that. But how far do we leave them to, on their own good wishes and their own interest? I don't know. Note the following, and I know what I'm going to say irritates some of you, I have no doubt. And I said this in an interview, so I can only quote myself. Hamas's best friends in the world are American college campuses. I suggest, look at the Arab world. Have they come to Hamas's assistance? The answer is no. When I was negotiating and we were trying to get, I was not involved in this part except for one meeting with an international organization, to get the Arab world, to put money on the table for Palestinians, zero. Zero, zero, zero. They used the Palestinians because of Jerusalem. And now with Hamas, ask yourself, does any Arab country want any of the Gazans? The answer is no. Should the Gazans stay in Gaza? Of course. So, but the problem at the moment with respect to a two-state solution, which at some point we're going to have the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, Hamas and the West and the Palestinian Authority loathe each other, hate each other, despise each other, and that's a reality. I mean, it's just a reality. So one of the questions that I get asked a lot also is Gaza to where? So put aside Trump, right? Put him aside for a second. What is called in Hebrew, the day after. There are those in Israel who fantasize about the resettlement of the Gaza Strip. That is beyond vile. I've dealt with Jewish terrorists and I've dealt with Jewish settlers, and it is a really problematic population group. Trust me on this one. And the thought of them coming back to resettle the Jewish settlements in Gaza is a terrible idea because, for one reason, from my perspective, it means that Israeli soldiers will have to protect them. And for an Israeli soldier to have to protect a Jewish settler in the Gaza Strip, trust me on this, it doesn't work out well because soldiers get killed. And I hate this expression, but Chagit and I made a deal that we can talk about this, in spite of the fact that we have a kid in the idea of soldiers who are getting killed are sheep to slaughter. And you can't imagine how much it pains me to say that, because I have a child in the idea, in it right now. But I genuinely believe that they are being sacrificed for no reason whatsoever. And as a parent to say that in public like this is beyond painful. But we made the decision I can say that. Jewish settlement in the Gaza Strip is exactly that. Jewish and Israeli annexation of the West Bank, it serves the needs, political needs of the extreme or messianic needs of the extreme right wing. No, because that's going to maintain this status quo forever, and it won't end. So that's why you need young, new leadership. On the other hand, when I was sent by the government of Israel to Washington, D.C. in 1997, there were a small group of Palestinians. We arrived in Washington on a Sunday. We all signed do not disclose, right? NDAs, right? Okay. That was on a Sunday. Monday morning, banner headline in Washington Post: secret Israeli delegations in Washington. We negotiated what is called the Safe Passage Agreement, which was the most important agreement of the Oslo Agreement, the two roads between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That was the first time that I spent time with Abu Mazen, the president of the Palestinian Authority. At the time, he was 300 years old. And he's still the president of the Palestinian Authority, and he's still democratically elected. He's won one election 20 years ago. So not only do we not have any future leadership, they don't have any leadership either. The hope had been a guy named Barghouti, who I think is in jail for life imprisonment because he killed, 20 Israelis, 40 Israelis, whatever. I say to myself, if he's going to be the future of the Palestinians, I'm willing to ignore the fact that he has blood in his hand from here to there. Because if he's willing to negotiate with us, if he's a normal guy, then, Zeigesund, as we say in Yiddish, I can live with that. They don't have leadership either, and we don't have leadership. There's a real dearth of leadership. By the way, not to offend, my take on the United States of America at the moment, there's also a dearth of leadership here. Don't kill me. So before we go to questions and answers, here's where we are. We are still living in October the 7th. Those of you who have been to Israel know that by law, a soldier's death can't be announced. I can't do this. Can't be announced until the family's been notified. So there are code words during the day on the radio that give you a heads up that you're going to be told that a soldier has been killed, right? Throughout the day, tuck, 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 until the soldier's death is announced. I, as the two of you know, I don't really sleep, right? And so what I'm doing constantly with my iPhone is seeing if, another soldier has been killed, if there's anything new with the hostages, because for me, that's what everything runs through that. Which means I'm thinking tactically and not strategically. It's a problem. I think most of us, of my set, are stuck in that also. People like us have, kids in the army. People who we know, those of you who've been to Israel know there are no degrees of separation. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows someone who's a hostage. Everybody knows someone who's been killed. I mean, we all know each other. What we need is to, when this somehow ends, is to take a deep breath, allow ourselves a deep breath, and then to do the following. To begin the painful, complicated process of rebuilding our society from within. That's going to require the world to leave us alone. I get asked all day long, what should we, I don't mean to offend anybody, obviously. What should we as American Jews do? Again, if I offend, I apologize. Leave us alone. We need to rebuild ourselves from within. We don't need assistance. We don't need your advice. Because it can only happen positively if we do it ourselves. Will that happen overnight? No, it won't. Because I'm not naive, trust me, I've been around the block. There are threats, right? I mean, spend time at bomb shelter. You have, Hamas here and Hamas there. The Israel to where will have to start from within, and it's three things. Once we get the hostages back. By the way, nothing can happen until the hostages are back. That's where it begins. One, we're going to have to end this judicial reform. Two, we're going to have to deal with the Orthodox. And three, we're going to have a constitution, because that's the only way that you can really have true democracy, which rights are guaranteed, protected. And the final word, first of all, before thanking the two of you for having me. I think most Israelis will tell you that at the moment it's brutal. As if my wife were here, Chagit were here, she would tell you we've all aged terribly and we all look like shit. It's true. It's true. Because we're all living in this constant, never-ending tension. But because I am the world's ultimate optimist, and as the only child of two Holocaust survivors, if you're not optimist, you can't make it through the day. I'm 100% convinced that at the end of the day, the forces of democracy will win. That we have no choice but to be full-on engaged in this, and that the young people of Israel will step to the front, become our next generation of leaders, and enable us to really be what we want to be, need to be, with the understanding I'm not idyllic, I'm not rose-colored. It's hard, but there is no choice. On that note, unless I put them all to sleep. Questions, anxieties, concerns?
Okay, thank you very much, Professor, for speaking with us. It was a wonderful talk. Now I'd like to open up the floor for a Q&A session. If anyone has a question, please line up on the sides and wait your turn to ask a question. When you come up here, please say your name, your grade, the school that you go to, and the major that you are currently studying.
Thank you. Where are you from?
I'm from Santa Cruz, California. And so the question, so you're saying about the hostage situation. I was just curious how you think, especially with the lack of leadership on both sides. How are they? Oh, yeah, the mic's on now. How do you go about that hostage situation when there is such a lack of leadership on both sides?
You asked the question. So this complicated deal, right? Stage one, stage two. The stage two negotiations were supposed to begin this week, right? And they didn't begin. For the reasons that I outlined, that Netanyahu really doesn't want this. He uses the trip to Washington now, Trump's transaction thing. There are 3 hostages supposed to be released tonight or tomorrow night, if I recall correctly. The first, and here's the problem with this, to your question, with this negotiation. I know this term makes people uncomfortable. The 100 hostages who are alive, it's actually, those of you who are Jewish know, it doesn't matter if your hostage is alive or dead, because the state of Israel owes a Jewish funeral to a hostage regardless of the situation. We divided them into 33 and 67. We did, I know this offends some, we did a Schindler's List. 33, and then we left 60, we're leaving 67. That's Schindler's List. As a child of Holocaust survivors whose grandparents were murdered in Auschwitz, that is abominable. Netanyahu agreed to it. Why did he agree to it? Because he doesn't want his prime ministership to end. The stage two, I don't really know what happens to your question. I don't know what happens to stage two, now that there's been this, I don't know what they call the Trump thing, how that's going to complicate this. on Saturday night, because every Saturday night the hostages' families demonstrate. There are going to be, if you ask me, huge demonstrations. Even though the weather is terrible in Israel, you think it's raining here, this is child's play. We're literally on the verge of a tsunami in Israel. I mean, not politically, but rain-wise. I think as the hostage families realized that there's been a twist thrown into this that will leave the hostages there. And I think the focal point of this, at least in the last few days, have been, not by chance I repeat this, the 2 infants. I think that really has shown a bright light. And I don't know really what you do with this. There was a sense that something was going to move forward, and it's one step, what I told you, one step. At the moment, to your question, which is really goes to one of the great questions, I don't know who, Sinwar's brother who runs Hamas, I don't know if he has the ability to release 67 hostages. I don't know what Qatar's role in this. I can't begin, obviously some of you are parents. I can't begin to imagine what it's like to be a parent of a hostage with the understanding that your government has abandoned your child. And that is an indictment on Netanyahu that will carry him forever. Great question. There's no clear answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question. So, many people have said that October 7th, as horrific as it was, saved the state of Israel, both from democratic collapse and from a more morbid future where Hezbollah joins Hamas in its assault on innocent Israeli civilians. Do you view October 7th in this light? Do you see a future where Israel comes out of this stronger, where its democracy is strengthened, and where it remains a strong actor in the Middle East?
I think the combination of the judicial reform demonstrations and the demonstrations on behalf of the hostages have led us to the clear understanding that we, my ilk, has no choice but to be as engaged can be. And I genuinely believe that strengthens democracy. I'm not naive, right? I'm well aware of the fact that there are those who disagree with me, 100%, totally. But I do think that in the long run, I think this absolutely not only strengthens democracy, but will strengthen us democratically. But that too, to your question, will take time. It's not, hocus pocus. Because in the meantime, I remind all of us, whatever it is, 875 soldiers, I think, have been killed, something like that. I don't know how many have been wounded, thousands. This is a huge strain on society and the reservists. I keep coming back to the reservists. I don't know how many are right now reservists. At the peak, it was 300,000. A lot of these guys, they lost jobs. Small business, family businesses collapsed. And one of the other things that we haven't even referenced, I don't know how many of you are psychologists. We're going to have a very, 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 very significant PTSD issue to address when this is all over. The social services, that's right, social services are collapsing. Also in part because the government has, rather than spending money on this, it spends money on that. I don't know how many soldiers, there was an article, I think, in Haaretz last week or 2 weeks ago about soldiers, reservists taking their own lives, talking about taking their own lives. This is going to be a huge issue to PTSD post-October 7th, which in our spare time, joking, we're going to have to address as well. That's also an issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leo. I'm a senior studying English at Pomona, not CMC, but it's good to see the ATH is doubling down on your DEI efforts. My question is just, does the Israeli left have a future in Israel?
So the head of there used to be a party called the Labor Party. Some of you may have heard of it, yes? The Labor Party in its present iteration has zero influence on anything. The new head of what used to be called Labor, which now I don't even know what it's called, Shel Yair Golan, maybe. I think, we talked about this earlier, I think we have moved somewhat right. I don't know if it's permanent right as a reaction to October the 7th, On the other hand, there are 400,000 of us every Saturday night demonstrating. I'm not good at math. That's equivalent to 20 million Americans every Saturday night for 2 to 3 years. 20 million Americans spending their Saturday night demonstrating. That's a lot of people every Saturday night. It doesn't include the Sunday demonstrations. It doesn't include the marches. But to the Israeli left, I think at the moment, I didn't see the polls today, but last week's polls, the party that has the party doesn't even exist yet. Is Naftali Bennett's party, which is one of those coalitions that comes together like this. At the moment, I think the Israeli left does not have real sway in Israeli politics.
Hi, my name's Amelia. I'm a senior at CMC. I'm originally from New Hampshire. And first, thank you so much for coming to talk. It's really broadened my perspective. My question is, you mentioned the college protests, and we've definitely seen that movement at the 5 Cs. And I'm just curious from your perspective if those protests have made any impact on the situation, and if so, kind of how have they impacted or influenced the situation?
The Israelis couldn't understand this at all. We could not wrap our minds around what are they called, encampments? It was a source of I don't know if this expression is head scratching. I don't know to what extent Hamas was aware of it, but we talk about social media, right? I do watch Twitter a little bit. I was watching, I know I will piss off X percentage of you. I was watching college students saying stuff they're clueless. Just utterly clueless. And it's like, really? I even saw, what's the name of the guy who walks around with the microphone, right? He's pretty funny on Twitter. But they were yelling, river to the sea, which river, which sea? From the Caribbean to the Mississippi. But hang on. We as Israelis have totally failed in explaining ourselves. What we call in Hebrew davrut, which is representing, right? We've done a really, really poor job of it. Whether it's at Columbia or Stanford or other places, it was mind-boggling to us to understand how you can protest. You want to protest, go protest. But I remind all of you that Israeli women, yes, not important if they're Jewish or Muslim or whatever, were butchered and raped and sexually assaulted on October 7th. And I don't remember any of the encampments saying, wait a minute, I'm out about this. I will tell you this, as I told them. I gave a talk, I told you, right? I gave a talk in San Francisco last March, April, to this huge group of Jewish lawyers. Okay. So you get all the emails afterwards. Right? Okay, the best email I got, what did I tell you, right? Amos, it's always good to hear you talk. What's the next word? But I was invited to talk about the rape of the Jewish women, of the Israeli women. So Amos, it's always good to hear you talk, but every word you said is nothing more than hearsay. So I called Chagit and I said, what do I do, right? I can't tell you what she told me to say, right? But what do you do with that? I gave a talk in Salt Lake City whenever it was, and I had somebody I think who you know come up to me afterwards and say, really good to hear you talk, but every word you said about the rape, the sexual assault never happened. I don't know what to do with people who are so remarkably ignorant. I don't know what to do with that, and I refuse, this is me. I refuse to get up and get caught up in the game. I know there are those who do this. Anti-Semitism. I refuse to go that route. I never have been comfortable with that. Is there anti-Israelness out there? Yeah, of course, sure. But we also do a really shitty job of explaining ourselves, right? Some of the demonstrators are anti-Semitic, they could be, but I don't allow myself to go there. It's too easy. Did the long-term harm, this will irritate some of you, I have no doubt. What's called I'm from Ann Arbor, right? So the undecideds in Michigan who couldn't decide whether to vote for Harris or for Trump, ended up voting for Trump. I hope they found a mirror on Wednesday, put their faces right in front of it, because is this what they voted for what Trump is talking about Gaza? And I think also the college students who couldn't decide, saying Harris and Trump are the same thing, it came back and it bit you where it bites you. But again, we as Israelis, to your question, we lost the college campuses a long time ago, and I even will tell you more. There was a period of time when you were the dean, I did a ton of speaking through the Israeli Foreign Ministry. When I tell you a lot. Before COVID, for reasons that were never clear, the foreign ministry cut the budget of people who actually know something speaking. And we lost the college campuses, and I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know how we, re-engage with that. But I think at the moment that from a student perspective, maybe also frankly from some professorial perspective, we have lost the college campuses, and that is a huge, huge, huge problem. Because you people, right, you're the future leaders of America. I'm probably like the oldest person in the room. You guys are the future leadership, and we have lost the campuses, and I don't know how we bring that back. And I would tell you even more than that. 5 years ago, before all this, right, I spoke with a member of the Israeli government, and I asked him, what are you people going to do about college? Unrelated to all this, what are you going to do about college campuses? And he says, well, we'll be fine. I said, that's not an answer. You need a program. You need a consistent, it's expensive. There's no choice. And for now, we've lost this fight. It's a problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, this formally concludes this section of the talk. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you, Professor, for speaking with us. And if anyone has any more questions, please feel free to stay and ask them just back there so that the staff can start cleaning the tables. Thank you very much for coming, and good night.